Our final question about Sting, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Ryan Hayes in Cold Spring, Kentucky.
I know Ryan. He's a very good customer.
Sting's jump to AEW has reignited the old Sting versus Undertaker discussion, specifically the debate over whether it should have happened while WWE had the chance. From all accounts, Sting was very vocal about wanting that match.
I'm sure he did.
Whereas Taker has gone on record more recently as saying it was a match better left as a what if.
Exactly.
And with time, I've come to side with Taker's viewpoint. With the injuries to both men and their ages, it does seem like a match that looks way better on paper. If you were in Vince's position and had both men in your company, older and damaged, would you have pulled the trigger on the match? Do you think a cinematic match should have occurred at the very least? Should something at all have been done involving both men?
Yes. They should have been tag team partners against somebody who could have bumped off of them. Should they have ever had a match? Are you out of your fucking mind? It's complete idiocy from the first time. And go back from the first time people started talking about it. I've said the same thing. That's one of those matches that people would want to see in their heads more than they'd want to see when they saw it. Number one, at the time frame that it was possible, Undertaker's body was already breaking down, and Sting, as we saw, was not in the best of shape because Seth Rollins, one of the better workers in the company, managed to fucking nearly paralyze him. Who would win? The Undertaker, they fucked up and broke the streak with Brock, and that was Vince that day and whatever, but they should have never broken the streak. But once they broke the streak, I think they realized he better never lose again at WrestleMania, because that would be a bummer. Well, when they were talking about doing the match, Undertaker, as I said, his body was already breaking down. He could work with younger guys that could do a lot of the shit, and he's so smart, he could do the smoke and mirrors, but against Sting, fucking guys, he's old. Sting's older than Taker. So there would not have been the one athletic guy, young guy that, you know, could fulfill that part of it. Secondly, who do you want to win? You want to bring Sting into the WWF, have him have a dream match with The Undertaker and beat him? I wouldn't have beaten Sting at all in the WWF. I'd have given him a match that he could have won and fucking put him out on that one. But to have Sting lose to The Undertaker, that'd piss off all the ex-WCW fans. And to have Undertaker lose, that'd be ludicrous. To have anybody lose would be ludicrous. Because nobody at that point in time, if they were both still active full-time in their careers, that would have been a great match. And something you could have done numerous things with that. But in the position that both guys were in when the match became possible, no, you shouldn't have booked it. You shouldn't have had it. People would have thought they wanted to see it, but then it would have been a bummer at the end because somebody would have to lose or be a bullshit finish, and everybody complain about that. If they could have figured out some way that they could be tag team partners against some team that had some heat, and people wanted to see them that team get the shit kicked out of them, that would have been great. But Sting versus Undertaker, people just got fixated on it because the match had never happened. For good fucking reason. And that's why Mark was smart enough to know all those things that I just said. And to be honest, while I'm not knocking Stinger, the one thing that makes me think that he will not be good at other roles that he might be able to take that are less physical now is because he never really, as we've talked about, understood the business. And he was never really a big fan of the business. He and Warrior, neither one. That's why they both stunk so bad. They never watched it growing up. They were never fans. They didn't get it mentally. Sting was a better student. Warrior was a piece of shit. So Warrior was a 3-year flash in the pan of unbelievable proportions, and Sting had a whole long career. But he's not doing this, as we said, we talked about his debut. He's not doing this for a love of the business. He's doing this because Tony Khan has obviously given him a lot of money. So I don't see him being somebody said, well, he could be a trainer. That line writes itself, because a lot of guys helped in the ring train Sting, but I've never heard anybody say that Sting ought to be training other guys. as somebody said they even had him in TNA be a commissioner or a general manager or something. I don't know how that went. But I'm just, you've got a guy that didn't really ever understand the mental part of the business at a high level, was a great athletic performer, but it was not going to be a booker. Would anybody suggest Sting should book this? No, nobody's ever met Sting should suggest he book anything. So I'm not surprised that Taker knew not to have the match and Sting wanted it. Also, because Sting probably see $1 million payoff. But, and Sting didn't understand probably at the time why seeing him get beat would be a bummer to a lot of his fans, because wins and losses don't matter anymore and really didn't matter to begin with to him, because it's, he's one of those guys that when he got in the business, it was the start of the era where some of these guys looked at the business as a performance to begin with rather than their life. So I'm sure he wouldn't care, but it just didn't make sense.
I was a big fan of Surfer Sting, but you have to note that Sting got over better than ever before when he didn't wrestle and he didn't do promos. When he just dropped in, beat a couple guys with a baseball bat, and then vanished. For a year, or however long it was.
For a year. And then he drew the biggest house of his entire career. And then the more they saw him, the less it drew. There's all kinds of lessons there.
I heard Scott Cornish recently on John McAdams' podcast, Stick to Wrestling, talking about Sting and how he was never a Sting fan. He doesn't get it. And he was talking about his promos, and he said he had 2 catchphrases. One was woo, which was Ric Flair's catchphrase. And the other was it's showtime, which he stole from Beetlejuice. And I never thought of it in that context, but it's true.
Well, but hey, it worked. It worked for him.